Honorable President of the Parliamentary Assembly, Honorable Secretary General, distinguished members of the Assembly. At the outset, I would like to warmly greet you and congratulate you, distinguished Mr. Nicoletti, on assuming the high office of the President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. You have indeed embarked upon this mission in rather challenging times. I strongly believe that your extensive experience and are exactly what is needed for the future success and reputation of our organization. I also wish to commend Mrs. Kyriakidis for her excellent performance in the capacity of President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. The last time I had the honor to speak from this high podium was in 2013, when Armenia held the chairmanship in the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. That mission served as a key landmark in our integration within the larger family of the Council of Europe. I trust we met the expectations while carrying out that mission. Tomorrow is January 25, the day on which we acceded to the Council of Europe exactly 17 years ago. At the time of joining this Europe-wide structure, we were fully aware of the path that lay ahead of us. We were also fully aware that building and strengthening democracy would not be easy without the support and direct involvement of the Council of Europe structures. Indeed, through political will and joint constructive engagement, we managed to overcome numerous obstacles and to achieve profound improvements. As I stand before this Assembly today, I can proudly state that we have honored the main commitments assumed vis-à-vis the Council of Europe in terms of Armenia's democratization. Moreover, this is not just our assertion. Our achievements in consolidating democratic institutions have been recognized by the monitoring reports of the Council of Europe bodies. We firmly continue the efforts of joining the Europe-wide legal framework. The number of conventions Armenia has already signed up is close to 70. For us, this process is not simply about honoring the commitments that we undertook. In doing so, we are primarily implementing our own credo and our own convictions. We shall continue in that same vein. Moreover, our country's progress on the path of reforms will get a new momentum and accelerate in April, when the amendments adopted under the reformed constitution will enter into force, and we will embark upon the implementation of activities envisaged by our comprehensive and intense partnership agreement with the EU. Any democracy is a living organism. Throughout our quarter-century-long efforts in state building, we aimed at nourishing this organism. We have been fully conscious that democracy constantly requires attention, review, and advancement. It cannot afford a standstill and must keep up with the rapidly changing times in order to remain viable. Along the lines of this logic, we undertook constitutional reform in Armenia, which received wide-ranging support of the Council of Europe. In April, with the clear commitment to the pillars of the Council, the best to the parliamentary system of government, and throughout this period, I have announced it from this high podium.
Since succeeding to the Council of Europe, dear ladies and gentlemen, our country has heard the criticism and encouragements of the Council of Europe. I have no doubt that both have contributed strongly to Armenia's progress. This whole time we have cooperated closely with the Venice Commission, and based on the expert opinion of the Venice Commission, we refined the constitutional reforms package. In an atmosphere of mutual trust, this efficient engagement continues to date through a process of implementing numerous new legislative solutions under the reformed constitution. This was best manifested in deliberations of Armenia's new electoral code, which resulted in the adoption of the code in a transparent and inclusive process with the participation of the various political actors across the board. We opted for something unprecedented. For the first time in history, we published the signed lists of voters after the election. As you know, this practice is not common, especially in light of personal data protection concerns. However, we decided, and we did so in order to achieve greater public trust in the elections. The new electoral code clearly proved its viability in the 2017 April parliamentary election. This election was observed by a large number of invited observation missions, including a delegation of this assembly. It is important to underline that the new electoral code also resulted in allocation in the National Assembly of a certain number of seats, which are exclusively for representation of the national minorities. This is yet another step towards more participatory and inclusive governance. We're currently reforming our judicial, criminal and criminal procedure codes, as well as the Referendum Act and the law on the Constitutional Court. We are well aware that the rule of law can be safeguarded only by having an effective, independent and corruption risk-free judiciary. In this context, we highly appreciate the important role of the European Court of Human Rights, the jurisprudence of which plays an essential role in enhancing the quality of justice in our country. Based on the jurisprudence of the European Court, we have implemented a number of legislative reforms and we have improved the legal practices. These are important steps for consolidation of the human rights protection in our country. These efforts have not gone unnoticed. The Republic of Armenia is a leader among the Council of Europe member states in terms of proper and consistent implementation of the judgments of the European Court. We are convinced that proper protection of human rights and consolidation of democratic values cannot be effective without a relentless fight against corruption. The fight against corruption must be prioritized at all social and political layers. Armenia is contemplating a qualitatively new toolkit in this respect. In mid-2017, the Armenian Parliament unanimously adopted a number of laws that create a first-ever national entity for the prevention of corruption in line with all international standards. The entity will become effective in 2018 and the Parliament will elect its members. The anti-corruption package also resulted in the adoption of a law on whistleblowing and the protection of whistleblowers. We have also criminalized illicit enrichment. We are determined and committed to continuing our systemic and persistent everyday efforts towards eliminating the evil of corruption.
Distinguished members of the Assembly, since accession to the Council of Europe, our country has borne profound responsibility for honoring our obligations and respecting our collective commitment to the fundamental values of this organization. However, in recent years, we have witnessed an unfortunate and unprecedented crisis of values in this organization. Through their irresponsible conduct, to say the least, some MPs have acted contrary to the core mission of the Council of Europe and inflicted heavy blow upon the organization's reputation. The greater family of the Council of Europe thus faced perhaps the most serious challenge since its foundation, as cases of bribing assembly members and resulting dishonest voting were exposed. Since 2014, a number of politically biased and egregious reports and resolutions triggered a sharp change in the attitudes of Armenian society towards this assembly. However, these revelations justify the hopes that such corrupt practices are short-lived. Eventually, they will rise to the surface, stamping out resolutions thus adopted and discrediting the individuals and powers that back them. I am convinced that the report of the independent inquiry body looking into the exposed instances of corruption will eradicate those defective practices and help to strengthen the member states' trust in our organization. Ladies and gentlemen, upon accession to the Council of Europe, Armenia also undertook a commitment to pursue efforts to settle the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict by peaceful means only, and to use its influence over Artsakh to foster the solution to the conflict. Although the Council of Europe is not a conflict resolution platform, I believe it is appropriate to briefly touch upon the issue in light of our aforementioned commitment. Exactly 30 years ago, on the surface, everything could possibly seem calm and peaceful in Artsakh. However, the surface image was deceiving. We had never put up with Stalin's decision to annex Artsakh to Azerbaijan. Throughout all those years, the people of Artsakh were extremely anxious because the Baku authorities did their best to drive Armenians out of their historical cradle. According to the 1926 census, Armenians accounted for over 90% of Artsakh's population. As a consequence of the Baku policies, the percentage had declined to just 77% of the population by 1988. I myself was among the Artsakhtsis that were worried about these developments. In February 1988, the Artsakhtsis rose against the Baku policies and tried to exercise by peaceful means the Artsakh people's right to self-determination. I was at the forefront of the uprising. The Parliament of Artsakh took the decision and people went out for peaceful rallies. Azerbaijan's reaction was not simply a negative one. Azerbaijan's reaction was the massacre of Armenians living in the town of Sumgait, hundreds of kilometers away from Artsakh. It was an act of revenge against Armenians for the decision adopted by Artsakh. One side of the scale had a parliament's decision and peaceful demonstration, and the other had violence and massacres. Everyone who needs to deal with the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict resolution must clearly comprehend this fact. Hence, all attempts to put the parties of the conflict on the equal footing are inherently futile. Such an equation is nothing but false impartiality. It is an equality sign between the perpetrators of the Sumgait massacre and its victims. On February 27, we shall commemorate the victims of the Sumgait massacre. The massacres went on to become the state policy as Azerbaijan unleashed a war aimed at the complete annihilation of the Armenian population of Artsakh. Given the deficit of justice and the threat of extermination, Artsakh had no other choice but to resort to self-defense. Yet again, I was at the forefront, and I have never had the slightest regret about the choice I made then. The time is ripe for the resolution of this conflict. It requires strict respect for the established ceasefire regime and honoring all the agreements reached in the past. Settlement must be peaceful and overcome the deficit of justice. No matter where I find myself, I will always be at the forefront for this matter as well. The parties shall assume joint responsibility for the peaceful resolution of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and find a compromise, a middle ground settlement. The negotiation process under the auspices of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs is the only internationally agreed format for the resolution of this conflict. The international community, including Council of Europe, has reiterated its support to this format on numerous occasions. The commitment undertaken by Armenia and Azerbaijan requires a joint and concerted effort of all the parties to the conflict. However, Azerbaijan is obviously not ready for that. The aggression that Azerbaijan unleashed against Artsakh in April 2016 was characterized by egregious violations of the international humanitarian law against the peaceful civilians and prisoners of war. It struck a heavy blow upon the negotiation process by reawakening dreadful memories of the Sumgait massacres. Unfortunately, this assembly has at times allowed developments that turned a blind eye to the aforementioned facts, watering the mill of those who are not interested in peaceful settlement of the conflict. I call upon all the members of this assembly to apprehend the potential negative consequences of a careless or a biased language for the fragile security and in Artsakh. Facing a permanent threat of war, Artsakh continues to build democracy and promote respect for human rights. In all of these initiatives, Armenia will provide full support to Artsakh. Armenia will tenaciously defend the rights and interests of Artsakh and help to strengthen Artsakh's security. As the Secretary General of the Council of Europe has rightly noted, there must be no grey zones in Europe when it comes to the protection of human rights. I hope that in the not-too-distant future, this organization too will stand by the side Artsakh with all of its expertise. A person living in Artsakh deserves it. The people of Artsakh have long earned this right. The protection of human rights is a priority for the Artsakh government. As to the fundamental documents of the Council of Europe, Artsakh unilaterally subscribed to the European Convention of Human Rights and undertook to implement it fully. Commendably, Nagorno-Karabakh has achieved all of this on its own, without tangible support from any international organization. It proves once again that in Artsakh, respect for and protection of human rights are not mere words, but a conscious and determined choice. Artsakh cannot stay out of the international processes simply because Azerbaijan is opposed to it. The authorities of Azerbaijan commit flagrant violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms, not least the criminal prosecution of opposition figures and even their abduction from the territory of another country. This brings me back to the work of the European Court of Human Rights. The ECHR has examined applications by Azerbaijani citizens that are also related to the resolution of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. I understand that the ECHR takes up this issue with the sole purpose of precluding grey areas and safeguarding human rights throughout Europe. Nevertheless, political language and assessments in the decisions of the ECHR can have direct negative impact on the negotiation process. Therefore, it is necessary for the ECHR to exercise extreme caution in its assessments and avoid any political language. Distinguished members of the Assembly, our national economies are more vulnerable than ever in the face of the present-day global challenges. As a result, welfare and prosperity are at the center of the public attention. The challenging realities in our region, in their turn, undermine the economic growth potential. Therefore, we aspire to make the best use of all available resources, including the opportunities availed to us by integration structures. 5 years ago, in 2013, shortly after Armenia's decision to accede to the Eurasian Economic Union, many people, including a number of them in this assembly, expressed skepticism towards Armenia. However, Armenia proved her ability to combine engagement in different integration structures and even to serve as a role model for cooperation. On this day, 2 months ago, on November 24, on the margins of the Eastern Partnership Summit in Brussels, Armenia and the European Union concluded a comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement, which contemplates a completely new quality of engagement. Armenia's fully fledged integration in the Eurasian Economic Union was not an obstacle for that matter in any way or shape. Today, we actively continue to extend our international engagement in various other directions. The Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie is a case in point. That is, for us, a unique platform of engagement in terms of both language and culture and promotion of human rights. Armenia will have the honor to host the 17th summit of La Francophonie in October 2018 in Yerevan. The motto of the summit will be Vivre ensemble, living together, and a pact with the same name will be adopted for strengthening human rights and intercultural and interreligious dialogue. For us, it is not simply a motto. The Armenian nation knows the price of hate speech, intolerance and discrimination, and we fight against these practices on all possible platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, next year we will celebrate the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Council of Europe. It is a crucial landmark for our greater family, which has been fighting for the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms in Europe for almost 7 decades. An organization created by only 10 states, it now unites 47 states of the European family with a population of 820 million. I consider this to be an enormous achievement that should be cherished. No effort should be spared in building a positive agenda and further enhancing the role and significance of this organization. The mission of the Council of Europe, however, extends beyond that. The organization has a great role to play in political as well as civilizational terms. I believe that the organization needs a further stimulus in redefining its role and significance in Europe-wide political agriculture. The contemporary mechanism and arrangements are truly wanted by our societies in order to increase this organization's effectiveness. For quite some time now, we are closely following and keep at the center of our attention the commendable process of reforms initiated in the Council of Europe. Armenia supports the idea of convening a fourth summit of the heads of state and governments of the Council of Europe. I believe it will be a good opportunity for identifying the most pressing problems and issues of our continent and revisiting the vision of a stronger and more inclusive Europe. I am confident that the founders of the Council of Europe should have been very proud about the fact of uniting 47 countries of Europe under one roof. This is an achievement, the importance of which should not be underestimated. This unity needs continuous support from all of us. Armenia stands ready for the persistent journey towards a more mature form of engagement and cooperation. Armenia stands ready to contribute by all means at its disposal to the success of the Council of Europe, our shared home of democracy and the rule of law. I thank you.